The boardroom went silent when the security guard reached for the little girl's arm. She was asleep, curled on a leather chair against the wall, her cheek pressed into a faded backpack. One hand clutched the strap like a lifeline. The guard hesitated only a second before his supervisor snapped low and sharp company policy. No children on restricted floors. Michael Turner turned from the glass table too late. "Don't touch her," he said, his voice steady, but thin, like a wire pulled too tight. 48 floors above downtown Cleveland, the rain streaked sideways across the windows, the city lights blurring into long, white scars. Midnight meetings were common here. Children were not. Michael was 54. His hair had gone gray around the temples years ago, not from age alone, but from accumulation. Long nights, missed funerals, hospital corridors that smelled like bleach and old coffee. He wore a suit that had been pressed that morning and wrinkled again by evening, the fabric creasing where his shoulders slumped forward, as if bracing against an invisible weight. The supervisor glanced at the badge clipped to Michael's jacket. Senior risk analyst, not executive, not protected. "She can't be here," the man said. "If legal sees this, we all answer for it." Emily stirred. Her brow tightened. She made a small sound in her sleep, the kind a child makes when a bad dream is forming, but hasn't fully arrived yet. Michael stepped between them without raising his voice. "She stays, or I walk." That earned a few looks around the table, not sympathy, calculation. At the head of the room, Rachel Whitman did not move. She sat perfectly still, hands folded over a slim leather notebook posture, straight as a blade. 41 years old, CEO for less than a year. Her face revealed nothing. Not irritation, not surprise, only attention, sharp and focused, like a lens adjusting. "Everyone out," she said calmly. The supervisor blinked. Ms. Whitman eye now. Chairs scraped back. Shoes crossed the marble floor. The room emptied in seconds, leaving only Michael the sleeping child and the woman who technically controlled the future of both. Rachel waited until the door sealed shut. The quiet pressed in thick and heavy. "You've been here since 6 a.m, she said, not as a question. Michael did not nod. He did not apologize. He looked at Emily instead, watching the rise and fall of her chest, the way her fingers twitched like she was holding on to something only she could see. "She doesn't sleep without me," he said. "Not since her mother died." Rachel's eyes flicked to the child, then back to him. Something shifted, just barely. Not empathy, not yet. Recognition. "This floor is restricted after 10, she said. "You know that." "I know." His jaw tightened. "I also know the merger review was moved up twice. I know the compliance audit is due before sunrise. And I know my health insurance runs through this job." The words landed clean. No accusation, just fact. Rachel studied him, then really studied him, as if she were seeing him for the first time, rather than as a line item on a productivity dashboard. Michael Turner, 54, once a manager, now buried in back-end risk, never missed a deadline, never declined a request, never complained. Until now. "Get her a blanket," Rachel said after a beat. "And coffee. Decaf." She turned away before he could thank her. That night did not end with apologies. It did not end with understanding. It ended with spreadsheets, red-lined projections, and a city that refused to sleep. And it marked the beginning of a slow, grinding war no one in the room fully understood yet. Michael lived in a narrow duplex on the east side, the kind of place with uneven steps and neighbors who waved but didn't ask questions. Emily's room was small but meticulous. Stuffed animals arranged by size. Shoes lined up under the bed. A calendar taped to the wall with handwritten stars on the days she felt brave enough to sleep alone. Most nights she wasn't. She had been 9 when her mother died, 10 now. Old enough to know when adults lied. Old enough to hear panic even when voices stayed calm. Michael learned to sleep light, half awake, always listening. The babysitter quit after 3 nights. The next one lasted a week. Panic attacks, they said. Night terrors. Too much responsibility. Michael didn't argue. He paid. He apologized. He adjusted. The company adjusted nothing. By the 3rd week, his hands shook when he poured coffee. By the 4th, he started forgetting words mid-sentence. Names, dates, entire stretches of time. In the break room, people whispered, "Guy's a mess. Why doesn't he just take leave because he can't afford to?" The rumors were never cruel, just distant, detached, like watching a storm on the horizon and assuming it would never reach you. Rachel Whitman watched from a different angle. She saw the metrics first. Overtime hours spiking, error rates dropping, output rising. She saw a man breaking himself to keep the machine smooth, and she let it happen. Not because she was heartless, because she was afraid. The board wanted results. Investors wanted reassurance. A recent acquisition had nearly imploded under regulatory scrutiny, and every misstep was traced back to her desk. She was fighting for legitimacy in a room full of men who still called her young lady when they thought she couldn't hear. Michael Turner was reliable, invisible, the kind of employee systems are built on. Until the night the alarms went off. It happened just after 11. The compliance software flagged an anomaly in the offshore exposure model, a discrepancy buried deep in assumptions no one checked anymore. Michael saw it immediately, not because he was smarter than everyone else, because he had lived long enough to distrust clean numbers. He reran the model, again, slower this time. The numbers shifted, not dramatically, quietly, the kind of change that didn't scream fraud, but whispered risk. $4.8 billion misclassified. Enough to sink a division if discovered by regulators. He leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. He could escalate. He could document. He could protect himself. Or he could fix it. He chose the fix. By the time the sun rose, the model was corrected. The exposure realigned. The system breathed easier. No one thanked him. No one knew. Except Rachel Whitman, who read the overnight changelog while waiting for her driver and felt a chill she couldn't explain. She pulled his file. Years of spotless reviews. A demotion explained in a single line, family circumstances. She closed the folder and stared out at the city, the early light catching on glass towers built on other people's exhaustion. That was the first night she couldn't sleep. And it would not be the last. Because weeks later, long after the whispers turned into warnings, and Michael's body finally gave out in the elevator, between 48 and 49, Rachel Whitman would stand outside his front door just before midnight, coat unbuttoned, hair pulled back, no assistant in sight, staring at a nameplate on a peeling doorframe. Michael Turner. And for the first time in her career, she would knock without knowing if the door would open. Michael woke to the sound of someone knocking like they were afraid to be heard. Not pounding, not urgent. 3 measured taps, spaced just far enough apart to suggest hesitation rather than authority. He sat up on the couch, heart racing before his mind caught up. The living room was dim, lit only by a lamp he had forgotten to turn off. Papers were spread across the coffee table in uneven stacks, margins marked in red pen. His phone lay face down beside an empty mug screen, dark battery nearly gone. The clock on the microwave read 12:12 in the morning. For a moment, he wondered if it was a dream. Exhaustion had started doing that to him, lately bending reality at the edges. Then the knock came again, same rhythm, careful, controlled. Emily stirred in her room. He heard the faint rustle of sheets, the soft sound of her turning over. His chest tightened. Michael stood, joints protesting, and moved toward the door. Every step felt heavier than it should have, like gravity had decided to make an example of him tonight. He paused, with his hand on the knob, listening. Footsteps in the hallway, one set, still. He opened the door halfway. Rachel Whitman stood there framed by the dim emergency light at the end of the hall. No driver, no assistant. A gray coat pulled tight around her hair, tied back low and simple. Her face looked different outside the glass and steel of the office. Paler, more human, less prepared. "I called," she said quietly. "You didn't answer." "I was asleep," he replied, though it wasn't entirely true. "I know." She glanced past him, eyes flicking briefly toward the dark apartment. "I spoke to the hospital. They discharged you early, against my better judgment." She nodded once, absorbing it. There was a beat, where neither of them moved the air between them, heavy with things unsaid. "I won't come in unless you ask," she said. Michael studied her. Really studied her the way he did with numbers when something didn't add up. CEOs didn't do this. Not like this. They sent notices, delegated conversations, protected themselves with layers. He stepped back. 5 minutes, he said. "That's all I've got." Rachel entered slowly, like someone stepping into unfamiliar territory. Her eyes took in the room without comment. The worn couch, the thrift store bookshelf sagging under old paperbacks and binders. A framed photo on the wall of a woman with dark hair and a crooked smile holding a much younger Emily on her hip. Rachel stopped in front of it. "She looks kind," she said. "She was," Michael replied. They sat, not close, not far. The couch dipped under their combined weight, a small reminder that this space was not built for power. "I shouldn't be here," Rachel said after a moment, "from a legal standpoint alone." Michael let out a short, humorless breath. "Then why are you—" She folded her hands together, fingers lacing and unlacing, as if they didn't quite know where to settle. "Because tomorrow morning the board meets. And they're going to ask why a senior analyst collapsed on company property after working consecutive 16-hour days." Michael stiffened. "I didn't file a complaint." "I know," she said. "HR did. They didn't have a choice." Silence settled again. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. A television murmured through a neighbor's wall. "They're going to want a name," Rachel continued. "Someone to blame. Preferably someone without voting power." Michael felt a familiar knot tighten in his stomach. The old instinct. Brace, absorb, protect. "And you?" he asked. She met his eyes directly. "I'm going to give them mine." That made him laugh. A single sharp sound that surprised both of them. "You expect me to believe that," he said. "You didn't get where you are by falling on swords." "No," she said evenly. "I got here by making people invisible." The words hung there stark and unadorned. "I didn't see you," she went on. "Not really. I saw output, reliability, a buffer between me and failure. That's on me." Michael leaned back the couch, creaking under him. "You don't get to apologize your way out of this." "I'm not trying to," she said. "I'm here to tell you what happens next, and to hear what you want." He looked at her, searching for the catch. "What I want is to sleep through the night without worrying about losing my job." Rachel nodded. "That's reasonable. And to stop being treated like a liability because I have a kid." Another nod, slower this time. "And to make sure this doesn't happen to the next guy who doesn't know when to say no." Rachel's jaw tightened slightly. "That part is harder." Michael smiled without warmth. "Everything worth fixing is." From down the hall came the soft padding of feet. Emily appeared in the doorway, hair-tangled eyes half open, but alert. She looked from Michael to the unfamiliar woman, instinctively wary. "Daddy," she asked. Michael stood immediately. "Hey," You're okay. Rachel rose too, keeping her distance, lowering herself slightly, so she wasn't towering. Hi, she said gently. I'm Rachel. Emily clutched the hem of Michael's shirt. Are you from his work? Yes, Rachel said. I am. Emily considered this. Children were better judges of character than adults liked to admit. Did you make him sick? The question landed like a dropped glass. Rachel didn't deflect. She didn't smile. She knelt, bringing herself level with Emily's eyes. I asked him to do too much, she said, and I didn't stop when I should have. Emily studied her face, searching for something. Then she nodded once, as if filing the information away. Okay, she said, but he needs to rest. The doctor said so. I know, Rachel replied softly. That's why I'm here. Emily looked back up at her father. Can she leave now? Michael swallowed. In a minute. Emily nodded, satisfied, and shuffled back toward her room without another glance. The door closed with a soft click. Rachel stood slowly. She's remarkable. She's tired, Michael said. Just like me. They sat again. The clock ticked. Time pressed forward, indifferent. I'm not offering you a promotion, Rachel said. Not yet. That would look like hush money. And you'd hate me for it. He snorted. Probably. I am offering you a pause, she continued. Medical leave, fully paid, no penalties, no quiet demotion when you come back. And when I do come back, she held his gaze. We renegotiate your role, publicly, with HR, with oversight. You help me rebuild the guardrails we pretended we didn't need. Michael thought of the men and women he'd seen burning out in silence, of the ones who didn't have the luxury of collapsing in visible places. And if I say no, he asked. Rachel stood, smoothed her coat. Then I walk back into that boardroom alone tomorrow and explain exactly how we got here. Names, dates, emails. All of it. She paused at the door. But I'd rather not do that without you. Michael closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, the room felt different. Not safer, but honest. Go, he said. We'll talk later. Rachel nodded. She opened the door, then hesitated. For what it's worth, she said, voice low. You didn't just fix a model. You exposed a flaw in the way this place survives. Michael watched her leave. The hallway swallowed her footsteps. The door clicked shut. He stood there for a long moment, listening to his own breathing. The distant hum of the city. The quiet resilience of a life that refused to be reduced to numbers. Somewhere downtown, a boardroom waited. And for the first time in weeks, Michael Turner allowed himself to believe that the fight ahead might actually matter. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and quiet threat. Michael felt it the moment the doors closed behind him, the air heavier than the suit on his shoulders. He had slept 3 hours, maybe 4. Emily had finally drifted off around 3, her hand wrapped around his wrist like an anchor, and he hadn't moved until morning light slipped through the blinds. Now it was 9:30. The long table gleamed under recessed lights. Coffee cups sat untouched. No one smiled. Rachel Whitman stood at the head of the room, one hand resting on the chair that had once belonged to her father. She didn't look at Michael when he entered, not yet. The board members did. There were 7 of them today. 4 men, 3 women, all older than Rachel, all dressed in variations of restraint. Gray suits, navy jackets, faces trained to reveal nothing until it was useful. Mr. Turner said, Harold Bennett clearing his throat. 68, former regulator, the kind of man who spoke slowly to make sure every word landed. We were surprised to see you here, given recent events. Michael took the seat Rachel had indicated earlier that morning. Not at the table, along the wall, deliberate. I was asked to attend, Michael said evenly. Asked, Harold repeated, glancing toward Rachel. Or required. Rachel turned then. Her gaze was steady. Invited, she said. By me. A murmur rippled through the room, small, controlled, like wind moving through tall grass. Rachel clicked a remote. The screen behind her lit up with a chart Michael recognized instantly. Offshore exposure. Corrected numbers. You'll notice the revision made last Thursday night, she said. This adjustment prevented a misclassification that would have triggered a regulatory inquiry within weeks. Harold squinted at the screen. And who made that adjustment? Rachel didn't answer right away. She let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. Michael Turner, she said. All eyes swung back to him. Michael didn't move. He acted outside standard escalation protocols, said Denise Caldwell, head of internal audit. That's a violation. It's also the reason we're not in violation of federal reporting law right now, Rachel replied. Another board member leaned forward. You're suggesting we reward procedural disobedience. I'm suggesting we acknowledge competence, Rachel said, and examine the conditions that made unilateral action the only viable option. Harold folded his hands. Let's be clear. An employee collapsed on company property. That's a liability. The optics alone are exactly why we're having the wrong conversation, Rachel cut in. Her voice didn't rise. It sharpened. The question isn't how this looks. It's how this happened. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear. Recognition. Rachel continued. Mr. Turner worked an average of 78 hours per week for the past 6 weeks. That data is verified. He did not submit a single overtime complaint. He did not miss a deadline. He did not request accommodation. Then he bears responsibility, Denise said. He could have said no. Michael shifted in his chair, slowly, deliberately. May I speak? He asked. The room stilled. Rachel nodded once. Michael stood. His knees protested, but he ignored it. He faced the table meeting eyes one by one. I didn't say no, he said, because the system isn't built to hear it. A few brows furrowed. In my position, he went on, no doesn't sound like a boundary. It sounds like a lack of commitment, like age, like weakness. He glanced briefly at Harold. Not accusatory, just honest. I stepped back from management 10 years ago when my wife got sick. That decision didn't erase my experience, but it changed how I was seen. I became useful, reliable, quiet. He paused, choosing his words with care. This was not a plea. It was a statement. When work piled up, it came to me. Because I would do it. Because I wouldn't make noise. Because I still believed doing the right thing would eventually matter. Silence again. Thicker this time. And when I corrected the model, Michael said, I didn't do it to be brave. I did it because I've lived long enough to know that cutting corners only delays the reckoning. Denise leaned back. So, what do you want? Mr. Turner. Michael looked at Rachel, then back at the board. I want you to stop pretending burnout is a personal failure, he said, and start treating it like the operational risk it is. A few people shifted. One woman at the far end of the table nodded almost imperceptibly. Rachel stepped forward. Which brings me to my proposal. She clicked the remote again. New slides, policy drafts, timelines. Effective immediately, she said, we're implementing workload caps on non-executive roles, mandatory review thresholds, and protected accommodation pathways for employees with dependent care responsibilities. Harold raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting systemic change based on one incident? Rachel met his gaze. I'm suggesting we caught the incident before it became a pattern we couldn't explain. Denise exhaled slowly. This will cost money. So will losing our most experienced people. Rachel replied. So will lawsuits. So will reputational damage when this happens again, and we pretend we're shocked. The room buzzed now, Not loud, focused, calculating. Michael watched their faces. Some resistant, some thoughtful, one or two relieved. Harold leaned back. And Mr. Turner's role in all this, Rachel didn't hesitate. Senior risk advisor. Fixed hours. No direct reports. Authority to flag systemic exposure without penalty. Denise frowned. That sets a precedent. Rachel smiled thinly. So does ignoring collapse. The vote wasn't unanimous. It didn't need to be. When the meeting adjourned, people filed out with clipped goodbyes and eyes already on their phones. Rachel remained behind, staring at the darkened screen. Michael waited by the door. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did," she replied. "I just didn't want to admit it until you made it impossible not to." They walked out together. Down the corridor, past offices where people pretended not to watch. In the elevator, Rachel finally exhaled. "You scared them." He shook his head. "No, I reminded them." The doors opened onto the lobby. Morning light spilled across the floor. The city moved on, indifferent as ever. "Go home," Rachel said. "Be with your daughter." "And when I come back?" he asked. She looked at him, something like resolve settling into place. "We'll see if this place can learn." Michael stepped outside, the cool air filling his lungs. For the first time in a long while, the weight on his chest eased. Above him, glass and steel reflected a world built on momentum. But somewhere inside, a small crack had formed, and sometimes that was enough to let the light in. The first rumor reached Michael before noon. He heard it in the elevator, 2 floors below his, when a man he barely knew leaned toward a woman with a tight smile and said, "Funny how things change after a late-night visit." The doors opened before Michael could see their faces, but the words stayed with him, settling low in his stomach like cold water. By the time he reached his desk, the air had shifted. Conversation stopped, half a beat too late. Eyes slid away too quickly. A few people offered smiles that didn't quite land. He opened his email. 12 unread messages, 3 congratulatory, 2 cautious. 1 anonymous, sent from an internal address that could have belonged to anyone. "Careful, people are talking." Michael closed the inbox without replying. He stared at the window instead. Cleveland stretched below him, gray and persistent the river, cutting through the city like a scar that never healed, but never fully closed either. At 11:15, his phone vibrated. A text from Rachel. "Lunch. Conference room B. If you're up for it." He considered declining. Considered the relief of quiet, of going home early, of sitting at Emily's small kitchen table while she did homework and pretending for an hour that the world was smaller than it was. Instead, he typed back, "Okay." Conference room B had no windows. That was deliberate. The walls were pale, the table unmarked. Neutral territory. Rachel was already there, sleeves rolled up, jacket draped over the back of her chair. 2 salads sat untouched between them. She didn't smile when he entered, but her shoulders loosened slightly, like she'd been holding a breath. "They've started," she said. "I know," Michael replied, sitting. "They always do." She pushed one of the containers toward him. "I should have anticipated it." "You did," he said. "You just hoped it wouldn't matter." Rachel exhaled. "It matters because it undermines everything. It only undermines it if you let it," Michael said. "People fill silence with whatever story scares them least." Rachel picked at the edge of the plastic lid. "They're saying I staged the collapse, that I needed a distraction before the audit." Michael looked up sharply. "That's not just gossip. That's dangerous." "I know." Her jaw tightened. "Legal flagged it this morning. And they want distance," she said. "From you." There it was. Michael nodded once. "Of course they do." Rachel met his eyes. I didn't agree. You don't get to disagree forever, he said gently. Institutions outlast intentions. The door opened suddenly. A head poked in startled when it found them mid-conversation. Sorry, the young man said quickly. Didn't know this was booked. Rachel nodded. Give us 10. When the door closed again, she leaned back. They want you moved. Temporarily. Advisory role off-site. Michael considered that. A quarantine. Call it what you want. He smiled faintly. I've been quarantined before. Rachel watched him carefully. You don't seem angry. I am, he said. I'm just tired of letting anger drive. She hesitated. There's more. Of course there was. The audit team requested interviews, she continued. Standard procedure. But they asked for Emily's school records. Michael felt his chest tighten. Why to establish patterns? Rachel said quietly. They're framing concern, child welfare, workplace safety. That's a line, he said. I know. Silence pressed in again, heavier this time. I won't allow it, Rachel said finally. Not without cause. They'll find one, Michael replied. Or make it. Rachel's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, then turned it face down. This is the part where I ask you to trust me, she said. Michael thought of Emily, of her small hand gripping his sleeve, of the way her voice went tight when she sensed adults were lying. Trust is expensive, he said, and I've already paid a lot. Rachel nodded. Then let me earn it. He studied her. The CEO. The woman the rumors painted as calculating and cold. The woman who had stood outside his door at midnight with nothing but words and the risk of humiliation. Don't protect me, he said. Protect the truth. She met his gaze. That's the same thing. That afternoon, Michael left early. Not because he was told to, because he chose to. Emily was waiting at the window when he arrived home, face pressed against the glass breath fogging the pane. She opened the door before he reached it. You're early, she said. I know, he replied. Thought we'd break tradition. They sat at the kitchen table, the late sun slanting and turning dust into gold. Emily worked through her math homework tongue, caught between her teeth in concentration. Did you get in trouble? She asked without looking up. Michael paused. Children always ask the right questions. No, he said. But some people are confused. She nodded, accepting this. That happens. Later, as she brushed her teeth, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Turner, a woman's voice said. Calm. Professional. This is Angela Reyes from Child Protective Services. We received a request for information regarding your daughter. Michael closed his eyes. Yes, he said. I was expecting your call. The conversation was polite, thorough, unyielding. When he hung up, the apartment felt smaller. That night, after Emily fell asleep, he sat alone on the couch, documents spread before him. School reports, doctor's notes, letters from therapists, evidence of a life lived under scrutiny. His phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. They're pushing harder. I'm pushing back. I won't lose ground on this. He typed slowly. Neither will I. The next morning, the headline didn't break publicly. Not yet. But the internal bulletin hit inboxes at 8 sharp. Temporary reassignment of Senior Risk Advisor Michael Turner, pending review. Michael read it once. Then again. Emily watched him from across the room, cereal forgotten. Is that bad? She asked. It's inconvenient, he said. But we'll manage. He took her to school walking slower than usual, noticing things he had missed for years. The crack in the sidewalk, shaped like a bird. The way Emily waved to the crossing guard like they were old friends. When he returned home, the knock came at 10:40 in the morning. Not hesitant this time, firm, official. 2 people stood outside, a woman with a clipboard. a man in a blazer too warm for the season. "Mr. Turner," the woman said. "We'd like to ask you a few questions." Michael stepped aside. "Come in." As they sat, he answered everything, calmly, completely. Across the city, Rachel Whitman sat in her office legal counsel on speaker board members, pacing behind glass walls. "They're testing you," her lawyer said. "And him." Rachel stared at the city, jaw set. Let them. Back in the apartment, the CPS woman closed her folder. "Mr. Turner," she said, "this appears to be a workplace dispute masquerading as concern." Michael nodded. "That's my understanding as well. We'll document accordingly," she said. When they left, Michael sat down heavily, the adrenaline draining out of him. His phone rang immediately. "Rachel." "They came," he said, before she could speak. "I know," she replied. "They won't come again." "How can you be sure?" "Because if they do—" Rachel said, her voice steady and cold, "I stop playing defense." Michael leaned back, staring at the ceiling, feeling something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not relief. Resolve. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, lines were being drawn that couldn't be erased. And somewhere between the boardroom and a small apartment kitchen, a story was shifting, from rumor to reckoning, whether anyone was ready for it or not. The call came just after 7 in the morning, while Michael was packing Emily's lunch. The phone vibrated against the counter, rattling slightly, beside a jar of peanut butter. He glanced at the screen. "Rachel." He didn't answer right away. He finished cutting the apple, slid the slices into a small container, wiped his hands on a towel. Then he picked up. "They moved," she said without preamble. Michael leaned back against the counter. "So did I." "Good," Rachel replied, "because this isn't going to be quiet." Emily watched him from the kitchen table, legs swinging, eyes sharp. She had learned to read tone faster than words. "Is it the work people again?" she asked. Michael covered the phone. "Give me a minute." Rachel waited. He could hear it in her breathing. Controlled. Ready. "They called an emergency session," she said when he came back. "Board and external counsel. They think they can isolate this before it spreads." "And can they?" Michael asked. "They think they can isolate you." Michael closed his eyes briefly. The familiar pressure built behind them. Not panic. Focus. "Then it's already spread," he said. Rachel was quiet for a beat. "You're sure you want to do this?" He thought of the CPS clipboard, of the memo, of the whispers in the elevator that had hardened into something sharper. "I didn't choose this fight," he said. "But I'm not stepping out of it." "Then come in," Rachel said. "Not as staff, as witness." An hour later, Michael sat in a smaller boardroom than the first, the kind reserved for damage control. No windows, no nameplates, just faces arranged carefully around a table that had heard 1,000 quiet decisions. Emily was at school. Margaret from next door had agreed to pick her up early just in case. Michael had left a note on the fridge in block letters. "I'll be back, always." Rachel entered last. She didn't sit, neither did he. Harold Bennett spoke first. "This has escalated." Michael smiled faintly. That tends to happen when pressure meets silence. Denise Caldwell slid a folder across the table. "Your reassignment was temporary." "And public," Michael replied, which made it something else. "This company cannot function on individual grievances," another man said. "We have protocols," Rachel cut in. "You have optics." The man bristled. "We have shareholders." "And employees," Rachel said, "who are watching." Harold raised a hand. "Let's stay focused. Mr. Turner, your situation has created exposure, legal exposure." Michael nodded. "I'm aware." "You could resolve this," Harold continued, quietly. "A severance package, full benefits, A statement of mutual respect. There it was, the exit. Michael felt the room lean in the way people did when they expected compliance. "I won't," he said. Denise frowned. "Think carefully." "I have," Michael replied. "For years." Rachel watched him closely now, not intervening, letting him own the space. "I won't take money to disappear," Michael said. "Because this isn't about me. You know that." A murmur, irritation, unease. "You overestimate your importance," one of the men said. Michael met his gaze. "No, you underestimate your vulnerability." That did it. Rachel stepped forward. "If this company proceeds with forced separation," she said calmly, "I will submit my resignation within 24 hours, along with a full report to the audit committee and external regulators detailing the conditions that led us here." Silence dropped hard. Harold stared at her. "You'd burn this down, I'd light it up," Rachel said. "There's a difference." Denise shook her head. "You're choosing him over the institution." Rachel didn't hesitate. "I'm choosing the institution over its habits." Michael felt something shift then. Not triumph, alignment. Harold exhaled slowly. "If we pause," he said, "what happens next?" Michael spoke before Rachel could. Transparency. Every eye turned to him. Independent review, he continued. Anonymous testimony. Published findings. No quiet settlements. No scapegoats. "And you," Denise asked. "I stay," Michael said. "On record. On purpose." The room held its breath. Rachel nodded once. "That's my condition as well." It took 3 hours. Raised voices. Side conversations. Calls made from hallways. But by the time the doors opened again, something fundamental had cracked. They didn't win. Not fully. But they didn't lose. Michael walked out with no agreement in hand, no guarantee waiting. Just a temporary injunction on his reassignment and a formal investigation announced internally. Outside, the city was brighter than it had been in weeks. Rachel caught up with him in the lobby. "You okay?" He considered it. "I think so." She hesitated. "They're going to push back." "I know," he said. "So are people like me." That afternoon, emails began circulating, carefully worded, then less so. "I thought it was just me." "Thank you for saying it out loud. How do we help Michael read them slowly, one by one, not with pride, with gravity?" At 4:15, he picked Emily up from school. She ran to him, backpack bouncing, breathless. "You're smiling," she said. "Am I?" "Yes," she replied. "You look taller." He laughed softly. That evening, they ate dinner on the couch. Simple. Quiet. Emily told him about a science project. He listened like it mattered, because it did. After she fell asleep, he sat with his phone dark in his hand, the city humming outside. A message buzzed in. "Rachel. Tomorrow will be rough," he typed back. "So will standing still." Another message came a moment later. "Thank you for not taking the exit." Michael stared at the screen, then set the phone aside. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was surviving someone else's agenda. He was choosing his own. And somewhere beyond the walls of boardrooms and policies, beyond rumors and reputations, a line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Not by money, not by power, not anymore. The first reporter showed up before the investigation officially existed. Michael recognized the sound before he saw her. The sharp click of heels on the cracked concrete outside the school fence, the practiced pause, the way someone waited to be noticed without announcing themselves. He felt it in his spine, a tension he hadn't carried since his wife's illness turned their private life into a public chart. "Mr. Turner," the woman called gently as parents clustered nearby, coats, zipped coffee cups, steaming. "Just a quick comment." Michael tightened his grip on Emily's backpack. "No comments," he said, without turning. Emily looked up at him. "Who is she?" "Someone who doesn't need to be here," he replied. The woman smiled anyway, not unkindly. "There are concerns about corporate overreach and family safety," she said. "People want to know if you feel—" I said no. Michael cut in, finally meeting her eyes. "And you should leave." There was a beat where professionalism warred with curiosity. Then the reporter nodded, stepping back, already filing away the refusal as part of the story. Michael walked Emily to the car, his pulse loud in his ears. "Did I do something wrong?" Emily asked once she was buckled in. "No," he said immediately. "You did everything right." That afternoon, Rachel watched the clip without sound in her office. The image froze on Michael's face, jaw set, shoulders squared. A man who looked older than his years, but unbroken. The chyron beneath read Senior Analyst at Center of Corporate Burnout Probe. She turned the volume up too late. The anchor had already moved on. Her phone rang. Legal. "They've smelled blood," the attorney said. "We need to control the narrative." Rachel leaned back, eyes on the city. "We don't control it. We answer it." A pause. "That's risky. So is pretending we're clean." By evening, the board's inboxes were flooded. Shareholders, advocacy groups, former employees who had left quietly years ago and never said why. Michael's email lit up too. Messages from people he didn't know, some grateful, some angry, some demanding. He didn't respond. He cooked dinner, helped with homework, sat on the floor while Emily practiced spelling words she already knew just to feel him nearby. Later, after she slept, he sat at the kitchen table, documents spread in careful rows. He wasn't preparing a defense. He was building a record. The knock came at 9:20. 3 taps. Firm. Familiar. He opened the door to Rachel alone again, coat damp from a light rain. She didn't ask to come in this time. She waited. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I know," she replied, "but tomorrow's worse." He stepped aside. She moved through the apartment with the same quiet awareness as before stopping when she saw a stack of letters on the table. She didn't touch them. "They're calling an extraordinary session," she said. "They want to suspend the investigation." "On what grounds?" Stability Rachel said. "Market confidence." Michael let out a short laugh. "Of course, they'll say it's a distraction," she continued. "That the real risk is public perception." And what do you think? Rachel met his gaze. "I think perception is finally matching reality." She sat. He didn't. "There's something else," she said. "They're questioning your authority to speak on systemic issues." Michael folded his arms. "I didn't know authority was required to tell the truth." "They're arguing scope," she said, "that you're a single case." He leaned against the counter, feeling the familiar ache in his lower back. "Then let's make sure I'm not." Rachel nodded. "Tomorrow morning we open a confidential channel. External. Independent. Employees past and present." Michael studied her. "You'll lose control of it." "I already have," she said. "The difference is whether I pretend otherwise." There was a long moment where the hum of the refrigerator filled the space. "You're burning bridges," Michael said quietly. Rachel's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Some bridges only exist to keep people in place. The next day broke fast and loud. By noon, the channel had received over 300 submissions. By 3, double that. Stories poured in, missed births, panic attacks in restrooms, quiet demotions after caregiving disclosures, patterns that looked disturbingly familiar. Rachel read them all. Michael read some. Enough. He picked Emily up early again. This time, a camera waited by the curb. He shielded her with his body, his voice calm, his pace steady. "Please," he said, not raising his voice. "She's a child." The cameraman hesitated, then lowered the lens. That night, Rachel sat alone in the boardroom, The lights dimmed, the city reflected in the glass like a second darker world. Harold Bennett stood at the far end, hands in his pockets. "This is spiraling," he said. "This is surfacing," Rachel replied. "You're jeopardizing everything your father built." Rachel turned slowly. "My father built a company that survived because people gave it more than it ever gave back. I won't preserve that at the cost of pretending it's noble." Harold's jaw tightened. "You think you're different. I think I'm accountable," she said. "That's new." Across town, Michael tucked Emily into bed. She clutched her stuffed rabbit eyes heavy. "Are you in trouble?" she asked softly. He sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words with care. "Some people are uncomfortable." "Why?" "Because things are changing." She considered this. "Change is scary," she said. "But it can be good." He smiled, throat tight. "You're right." The phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Rachel, they're calling for my resignation." He stared at the screen. "What are you going to do?" he typed. A pause. Then, "I'm going to tell them no." Michael exhaled slowly. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The city didn't sleep. Neither did the truth. By morning, the headline broke. CEO rejects board. Pressure. Amid burnout reckoning. Michael read it at the kitchen table, coffee cooling in his mug. Emily peeked over the edge of the paper. "That's your work friend," she said. "Yes," he replied. "It is." His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Turner," a voice said. "This is the Department of Labor. We'd like to speak with you." Michael closed his eyes briefly, then opened them steady. "I'll make time," he said. When he hung up, he didn't feel fear. He felt momentum. Lines had been drawn, not just around him, but around a way of working that had hidden in plain sight for decades. And whether the people in power were ready or not, the ground beneath them had begun to move. The subpoena arrived in a plain envelope, slid under Michael's door sometime before dawn. He found it when he went to check the mail, still barefoot, still half awake, the hallway quiet, except for the distant rumble of a delivery truck. The return address was federal. The language inside was clean, restrained, and unmistakable. Testimony requested. Voluntary for now. Michael sat on the steps outside his apartment for a long moment, the paper resting on his knee, the cool concrete seeping through his pajama pants. The city was waking up slowly. Somewhere nearby, a radio played an old soul song. A woman laughed on a balcony above him. Life, indifferent and relentless. Inside, Emily was already awake. He could hear her moving around, opening drawers she wasn't supposed to open, humming to herself in a way that meant she was nervous, but trying not to be. "Daddy," she called. "Did we run out of cereal again?" He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket before going back inside. "Still got some," he said. "Just the boring kind." She wrinkled her nose. "Figures." They ate together at the table, the morning light pale and thin. Michael watched her spoon clink against the bowl, the way she lined up the blueberries before eating them one by one. He wondered how much she noticed, how much she absorbed without asking. "Are the camera people coming back?" she asked suddenly. Michael paused. "Maybe. But they won't talk to you." She nodded. "Good. I don't like how they look at me." Neither did he. At 9 sharp, Rachel Whitman stood in front of a row of microphones that hadn't been there the day before. The company logo loomed behind her, polished and familiar, a symbol that had never felt so fragile. She didn't read from notes. For decades, she said, "Voice steady. We treated burnout as a personal weakness instead of an institutional failure. That ends now." Reporters leaned in. Pens moved, cameras whirred softly. "This company will cooperate fully with all federal and state inquiries," Rachel continued. Not because we are forced to, but because accountability is the cost of leadership. A hand shot up. Are you protecting an employee at the expense of shareholders? Rachel didn't flinch. I'm protecting the long-term viability of this organization by confronting practices that harm both. Another voice. Will you resign if asked? Rachel met the question head-on. I won't step aside to preserve a system that only works when people stay silent. Across town, Michael watched the press conference on mute. He didn't need the sound. He recognized the posture, the choice to stand still when retreat would have been easier. His phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number. This is Claire Donovan. I used to work in compliance. Thank you for not backing down. Then another. I left 5 years ago after my son got sick. I thought it was just me. Michael set the phone down, overwhelmed. He hadn't expected this part. The weight of being seen. At 10:30, a black sedan pulled up outside his building. Not law enforcement, no lights, just quiet intent. The man who stepped out wore a tailored coat and a polite expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mr. Turner, he said, extending a hand. My name is Thomas Reed. I represent several of the company's major investors. Michael didn't shake his hand. You should leave. Thomas smiled. I'd prefer to talk, then talk from the sidewalk. The man hesitated, then nodded, adjusting his stance. There's concern about how far this is going. There's always concern when the truth gets expensive, Michael replied. Thomas lowered his voice. You don't have to carry this. There are other ways to resolve matters. Generous ones. Michael felt a familiar anger rise sharp and clean. You're offering me money to disappear. I'm offering you peace. Michael stepped closer. Peace that depends on silence isn't peace. It's surrender. Thomas sighed, the smile fading. You're underestimating the pressure that's coming. Michael looked past him at the building behind, at the life inside it. No, he said. I'm finally measuring it accurately. The sedan drove away without another word. That afternoon, Michael sat across from a Department of Labor investigator in a modest office downtown. No cameras, no drama, just questions and careful listening. Did anyone instruct you to work those hours? The investigator asked. No, Michael replied. They just made it clear what would happen if I didn't. And what was that? He thought of the years slipping by. The quiet demotion. The assumptions. I'd become irrelevant, he said, in a system where relevance equals survival. The investigator nodded, jotting notes. That's not uncommon. Then it's time it stopped being common, Michael said. By the time he left, the sky had darkened again. Storm clouds rolled in low and heavy. Rachel was waiting in her office when he arrived, shoes kicked off jacket, discarded exhaustion written plainly on her face. They sent someone, Michael said. An investor. She nodded. They sent 3 to me. Threats, promises, she replied. The polite kind. They stood in silence, the city flickering beyond the glass. They'll come harder, Rachel said. At you. At me. I know, Michael replied. Rachel turned to him, something fierce and honest in her eyes. If this cost me my job, I didn't ask you to do this, he interrupted. I know, she said. That's why I'm still standing. He studied her, seeing not a CEO now, but a woman who had stepped into the fire without knowing how deep it went. That night, Emily fell asleep on the couch, her head on his shoulder, the television murmuring softly. Michael didn't move. He let the moment stretch, fragile and perfect. When she finally stirred, he carried her to bed, tucking her in carefully. Daddy, she murmured. Are we okay? He brushed her hair back gently. We're doing the right thing. She nodded, already drifting. That's good. Later alone in the quiet apartment, Michael opened the envelope again, rereading the subpoena by the dim light of the lamp. The words hadn't changed. The meaning hadn't softened. He thought of his wife, of the promises he'd made when she was still alive. To be honest, to protect their daughter, to stand up when it mattered. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, deep and distant. Michael folded the letter once more and placed it on the table next to the stack of documents that had started this whole chain of events. For the first time since the whispers began, since the cameras arrived, since the pressure mounted, he felt something settle inside him. Not certainty, conviction, the kind that didn't need permission. The hearing room was colder than Michael expected. Not physically. The temperature was fine. It was the silence that chilled him, the kind that settled in spaces where words were weighed carefully, because they could not be taken back. The seal of the Department of Labor hung on the wall behind the panel, simple and unadorned a reminder that this was not theater. This was record. Michael sat at the long table alone. No lawyer at his side. That had been his choice. He had been advised against it, warned that it could be interpreted as arrogance or ignorance. He had listened. Then he had declined. Across the room, the panel members shuffled papers, adjusted microphones, avoided eye contact. They were not hostile. They were tired, overworked in a different way. Mr. Turner, the chairwoman, began her voice. You understand that your testimony today will be part of a federal inquiry. Yes, Michael said. I do. And you understand that there may be consequences. Michael nodded once. I've been living with consequences for a long time. A faint pause. The chairwoman glanced down at her notes, then back up. You may begin. Michael took a breath. Not deep. Just enough. I want to be clear, he said. I'm not here because I collapsed. I'm here because collapsing was the only language left. He didn't look at Rachel, seated quietly in the back row, her presence unobtrusive but unmistakable. He focused on the panel, on the truth, as he understood it. For years, this company rewarded endurance and punished visibility. If you could absorb pressure without complaint, you were reliable. If you asked for boundaries, you were a risk. He paused, letting the words settle. I didn't break because I was weak. I broke because the system was efficient. One of the panel members leaned forward. Can you explain that? Yes, Michael said. Efficiency without restraint eats people. Quietly, cleanly, until there's nothing left but output. He spoke of hours logged and emails sent at impossible times. Of performance reviews that praised dedication without acknowledging cost. Of the subtle shift in tone when he mentioned his daughter. Not overt discrimination, just omission. I was never told no, he said. I was just never allowed to say it. The room remained still. Pens moved. Screens glowed softly. Did Ms. Whitman instruct you to work beyond reasonable limits? Another panelist asked. Michael considered the question carefully. She didn't have to. The structure did. Rachel felt the weight of that sentence settle somewhere behind her ribs. She had built that structure. Inherited it, yes, but reinforced it. The questioning continued for hours. Methodical, precise. They asked about procedures, escalation paths, informal expectations. Michael answered without embellishment, without bitterness. When it was over, the chairwoman folded her hands. Thank you, Mr. Turner. Your testimony has been illuminating. Outside, the air felt thicker, the sky low and gray. Michael stepped onto the courthouse steps, blinking against the light. Cameras waited, but farther back than before, held at bay by quiet authority rather than force. Rachel joined him, standing at his side without touching him. You did well, she said. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I told the truth. That's what I meant. They didn't linger. A driver took Rachel away. Michael took the bus. At home, Emily was waiting with Margaret, her school bag abandoned on the floor. She ran to him the moment he opened the door, arms tight around his waist. "Did you win?" she asked. Michael knelt, holding her close. "I don't know yet." She leaned back, studying his face. "But you didn't lose." He smiled softly. "No, I didn't." That night the story broke wider. Not just one company, not just one CEO. Articles appeared tracing similar patterns across industries: healthcare, finance, logistics. Names changed, details blurred. The shape remained the same. Rachel read until her eyes burned. Former employees reached out, some with gratitude, some with anger that had waited years for permission to speak. The board convened again. This time, the room was different, less certainty, more caution. "They're calling it a watershed," Harold Bennett said, voice strained. "You've turned this into a movement." Rachel looked around the table. It was already won. We just stopped pretending otherwise. Denise Caldwell frowned. "There will be fallout." "Yes," Rachel said. "There already has been." "And your position?" Rachel straightened. "I'm staying. Or you can vote me out and explain why accountability was too expensive." No one spoke. The vote, when it came, was close. But it held. Rachel walked out of the room lighter than she had in months, though the work ahead felt heavier than ever. The following week, preliminary findings were released. Not conclusions, indicators. Language careful and damning in equal measure. Systemic risk factors identified. Corrective action recommended. Michael read the report at his kitchen table, Emily coloring beside him, her new markers scattered everywhere. "Is that about you?" she asked. "It's about a lot of people," he said. She nodded. "Good." The Department of Labor called again. More questions. Follow-up interviews. Nothing hostile, nothing finished. Rachel and Michael met once briefly in a neutral office downtown. No press, no agenda. "They're asking me to chair a task force," Rachel said. Michael raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like punishment." She smiled faintly. "It is, the useful kind." "And you?" she asked. "I'm still here," he said. "Still working. Still leaving at 5. She studied him. "Does it feel strange?" "Yes," he admitted. "Like I might disappear if I stop moving." Rachel nodded. "That passes." Outside, the city moved through autumn. Leaves fell. Children bundled up. Life adjusted in small, stubborn ways. One evening, Michael and Emily sat on the steps outside their building, watching the sky darken. The radio from a nearby apartment played an old song his wife used to love. Daddy Emily said quietly, "Are you scared?" He thought about it. "Sometimes." She leaned her head against his arm. "Me too." They sat like that for a while, the world turning without asking permission. Somewhere downtown, policies were being rewritten. Somewhere else, someone read a headline and recognized themselves for the first time. The reckoning was not over. It had barely begun. But for the first time, it felt like something that could lead somewhere better. And that Michael thought might be enough to keep going. The letter arrived on a Thursday, thick and heavier than it needed to be, as if the paper itself carried consequence. Michael didn't open it right away. He left it on the counter while he rinsed a coffee mug, watching steam curl toward the ceiling, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator. Emily was still asleep, curled on her side, one knee tucked up the way she had slept since she was little. He let the moment stretch, because he had learned that calm was something you noticed only when it was about to disappear. The return address read Lancaster Holdings. Certified mail. He opened it carefully. The language was formal, precise. The kind of writing that had been reviewed by committees and lawyers and people who never raised their voices. The board had reached a determination. Rachel Whitman would retain her position. The internal investigation would continue under external oversight. And Michael Turner was formally offered a restructured role effective immediately. Senior Risk Advisor, independent reporting line, fixed hours, whistleblower protections, codified in writing. He read it twice, then a third time. Emily padded into the kitchen, in her socks, rubbing one eye. "You're staring again," she said. He folded the letter. "I think I'm being offered my job back." She tilted her head. "Didn't you already have it?" "Yes," he said slowly, "but not like this." She considered that. "Is it better? I hope so." She climbed into her chair and reached for the cereal. "As long as you still pick me up." "I will," he said. "That part doesn't change." Downtown Rachel sat alone in her office jacket, off sleeves rolled, staring at the same letter in digital form on her tablet. The board vote had been closer than anyone would admit. She had felt every raised eyebrow, every pause, every unspoken calculation. Retaining her had not been an endorsement. It had been a concession. Her phone buzzed. "You got it," Michael texted. She exhaled a slow release she hadn't realized she was holding. "Yes. And so did you." There was a knock at her door. Harold Bennett stepped in without waiting to be invited, his expression tight. "You made this harder than it needed to be," he said. Rachel didn't look up. "You made it necessary," he scoffed. "You think this is over?" "No," she replied calmly. "I think it's begun." He watched her for a long moment, then shook his head. "You're betting everything on one man's credibility." Rachel finally met his gaze. "I'm betting on truth aging better than denial." Harold left without another word. By Monday, Michael was back in the building. Same lobby, same security desk, different posture. People noticed. Some avoided his eyes. Others nodded tentative but respectful. One woman stopped him by the elevator, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," she said, "for not taking the money." He didn't ask how she knew. "You're welcome," he replied. "But I didn't do it alone. The new office was smaller, quieter, no window. Michael didn't mind." He set his bag down, ran his hand across the clean desk, and felt something settle into place. Not pride, permission. That afternoon, the anonymous channel published its first aggregate report. Patterns, metrics, stories stripped of names, but not of weight. It spread fast. The backlash came just as quickly. An op-ed accused the company of caving to sentimentality. A market analyst called Rachel reckless. Social media lit up with arguments from people who had never worked a salaried job in their lives. Michael read none of it. Instead, he sat with a junior analyst named Kevin 26, and already fraying at the edges, and showed him how to flag unrealistic timelines without apologizing for them. "Won't that make me look difficult?" Kevin asked. "It will make you visible," Michael said. "Those aren't the same thing." At home, Emily taped a new drawing to the fridge. Stick figures again. One taller than the rest, holding two smaller hands. "Who's that?" Michael asked. "That's you," she said. "Before." And after she pointed to the same figure, "Still you, just not so tired." Rachel saw the drawing a week later when she came by in the early evening, announced this time briefcase in hand. She stood in the doorway, taking in the space, the evidence of a life lived carefully. "I won't stay," she said. "I just wanted to give you something." She handed Michael a thin folder. Inside was a draft charter. Employee protections, reporting safeguards, real enforcement mechanisms. "They want you to review it," she said, "before it goes public." Michael scanned the pages, his brow furrowing. "This will make enemies." Rachel smiled without humor. "I already have them." He looked up. "Why trust me with this?" "Because you read between the lines," she replied, "and because you won't let me soften the parts that matter." They worked through it at the kitchen table, while Emily did homework nearby, occasionally chiming in with questions that made both adults pause and rethink their language. "What's retaliation?" Emily asked at one point. Michael hesitated. Rachel answered, "It's when someone gets punished for telling the truth." Emily frowned. "That's not fair." "No," Rachel said quietly. "It isn't." The weeks passed. The noise didn't fade, but it changed pitch. Less outrage, more analysis. Other companies issued statements, some sincere, some defensive. Michael testified again this time as part of a broader panel. He spoke less, listened more. Rachel traveled, spoke, refused to spin. One evening as autumn gave way to early winter, Michael received another letter. This one handwritten. The envelope plain. It was from a man in another state, same industry, same age, different outcome. "I took the severance. I regret it every day. Thank you for showing another way." Michael sat with the letter for a long time, feeling the weight of paths not taken. That night, Emily asked him a question she had been holding in. "Are you still scared?" He thought of boardrooms and reporters and letters that could change lives. Of Rachel standing alone at a podium. Of people who had waited years to be heard. "Yes," he said, "but I'm not alone anymore." She smiled, satisfied. Outside the city prepared for winter. Inside institutions, something else was happening. Slow, uneven, real. And while the final outcome was still unwritten, Michael understood something he hadn't before. Change didn't arrive with applause. It arrived with persistence. And sometimes that was enough to hold the line. The winter came quietly without ceremony, as if the city had agreed to lower its voice. Michael noticed it first in the mornings, when the air carried a sharpness that made him pause before stepping outside, when Emily's breath puffed white as she waited for the bus, her scarf pulled too high, her eyes bright. Life had not slowed, but it had steadied. That difference mattered. The investigation moved forward without drama. No surprise raids, no televised confrontations. Just files, reviewed timelines, reconstructed patterns, acknowledged. The kind of work that never made headlines, but changed futures anyway. Michael stayed in his role. Not elevated, not sidelined. Positioned exactly where he needed to be. He flagged risks. He documented practices. He taught younger analysts how to say no without apology, how to recognize the moment when loyalty turned into erasure. He left at 5. Every day, sometimes earlier. Rachel Whitman remained CEO. That fact alone unsettled people. They expected collapse, a resignation, a replacement who would smooth the edges and return things to normal. Instead, she stayed, and normal never came back. She reduced her schedule publicly, not as an example, but as a boundary. She delegated authority she had once hoarded out of fear. She listened more than she spoke. When she addressed the company, she did not inspire. She explained, slowly, carefully, like someone who understood that trust had to be rebuilt brick by brick. Some executives left, quietly. Others stayed and adjusted. The culture shifted in small, measurable ways. Fewer late-night emails, more documented accommodations, a new understanding that endurance was not the same as value. Michael watched it happen from the inside, without triumph. One evening months later, Rachel stood at the back of a large auditorium, while an external auditor presented the final findings. She did not sit on stage. She did not speak until the end. When she did, her voice was steady, stripped of performance. "We did not fail because one person made a mistake," she said. "We failed because many people learned to look away. No applause followed. That was fine." Afterward, she and Michael walked out together into the cold, their breath visible. The city lights reflecting off fresh snow. "It's strange," Michael said. "Watching something end without seeing it replaced." Rachel nodded. That's usually how real change feels. They did not hug. They did not linger. Their connection was not built on intimacy, but on something sturdier. Mutual recognition, mutual restraint. At home, Emily had grown taller. Not much, but enough for Michael to notice. She slept through the night more often now. She laughed louder. She argued with confidence. One night, while they washed dishes together, she said, "My teacher asked what my dad does." Michael smiled. "What did you say?" I said, "You help people stop getting tired forever." She replied, entirely serious. He laughed, then, surprised by how close it felt to the truth. The world beyond them continued to wrestle with itself. Other companies announced reviews, some meaningful, some cosmetic. The noise rose and fell. Michael did not chase it. He learned the value of staying present where his feet were. Letters still came, emails too, some from people grateful, some from people angry that he had disrupted a system they had learned to survive. He read them all. He answered only a few. Rachel received more than letters. Invitations, warnings, opportunities framed as forgiveness. She declined what needed declining. She accepted responsibility without martyrdom. On a clear evening near the end of winter, Michael and Emily walked along the river, the ice breaking up slowly, the current visible beneath. Emily skipped stones that sank immediately. "Nothing floats," she complained. Michael shrugged. "Some things aren't meant to." They stood together, watching the water move, carrying pieces of ice away, not rushing, not stopping. Michael thought of his wife, of the promises he had made when life was simpler and harder at the same time. To be honest, to be present, to choose the right thing even when it cost him. He had not known then how often that promise would be tested. Behind them, a city adjusted. Ahead of them, nothing was guaranteed. And yet, for the first time in years, Michael did not feel like he was bracing for impact. He felt grounded. Rachel sent him a message later that night. A single line. "We're not done, but we're better." He replied with 2 words. "We are." The story did not end with applause. It did not resolve cleanly. It continued as most important stories do, in policy drafts and ordinary mornings in children growing up with parents who came home on time, in workers who learned that silence was not the price of survival. If this story resonated with you, if you believe accountability and humanity still matter, please like and subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments with these 3 words in all caps: telling the truth.